Hello and welcome to TV9 Digital. I'm Adarsh Vepachedu. In my previous video, I had spoken to you about the possible role of organochlorine chemicals in the Eluru mysterious illness case. But in the latest, in the blood samples of those who've been affected, lead and nickel have been found. Now this brings us to a very pertinent question, whether this is a case of water contamination, whether the water had heavy metals in them which led to this mysterious illness. But before we talk about that, let me first give to you the latest updates in this very case. To start off with, health officials at this point in time are suspecting it to be a case of food or water contamination. Lead and nickel have been found in blood samples collected by AIMS, which I was just mentioning. Yes, this particular sample size is very small, and hence more samples have been sent to really establish, to try and understand whether it is a case of water contamination. This apart, when you talk about the symptoms, they are same in most cases. It is seizure and loss of consciousness. However, there has been quick recovery that was reported, and people who were affected by this mysterious illness were discharged in about a couple of hours. Now, these seizures that we're talking about, they essentially indicate some sort of a neurological issue. What's worrying is that at least 6 persons who suffered these seizures have reported a second attack. What's also worrying is that this very mysterious illness is not confined to one area alone. I'm saying this because this illness is now spreading across Eluru, and it is also spilling outside. Now, if it was a water or airborne disease, only a particular area would be affected by this, but this is not really the case. Another puzzling factor is that in most cases, only one person in a family of 4 or 5 has been found to be affected. Now that's very interesting to say the least. So officials will have to find out as to what seems to be the explanation for this. Health officials are also checking water and food sources at this point in time to check for any kind of a contamination, doubts of which we've been raising time and again. When it comes to the total number of cases, fortunately they have reduced drastically in the last day or so. At this point in time, around 564 people have been affected by this mysterious illness, and most of them have recovered, fortunately. Now, this brings us to a very pertinent question. Is the Eluru illness a result of contamination of water by heavy metals? Now, if in case you were to consume this water that is contaminated by heavy metals, you would experience something called as neurotoxicity, which is essentially damage to the brain or the peripheral nervous system. And this happens, of course, when you're exposed to natural or man-made toxic substances. This is being touted as the primary cause at this point in time, but once again, I'm repeating myself. There is no confirmation whatsoever. We don't know what the source is, how and why it has happened, and nobody really knows anything about this mysterious illness. But there's one more interesting point that I must mention here. Metals were found in, traces of metals were found in blood samples, but not in the water and not in the food samples. So how is it that someone has lead and nickel in their blood, but there's no lead and nickel that was traced in water or food substances? That's again very mysterious. Now, there's one more point I'd like to mention here. If in case it's a case of lead contamination, the people who have been affected by it would be experiencing something called something to the peripheral nervous system. Their peripheral nervous system would begin to act up, or it could face some kind of a damage. But in this particular case, what we've seen is that people's central nervous system was affected. So there is a difference between the two. So that again brings us to a question whether it is really contamination of water that is the cause of this mysterious illness. Now, in this case, again, as I was mentioning, a lot of questions arise, but very few answers. And even if we are saying that it could be contamination of water, there are a few factors that begin to point otherwise. So, speculation apart, there is no hardcore confirmation that we have at this point in time that so and so is the reason for this Eluru mysterious illness. But yes, up until then, do stay tuned to TV9 Digital and subscribe to all of our platforms. Many thanks for joining us.